Hey, it's Ron McLean. Welcome to Hockey Talk on the Rock.
With Laura and Keith.
It's interesting.
So let's back up a second.
He played absolutely out of his mind.
It made no sense to me.
And now, here are your hosts.
Here we go. We are back doing Hockey Talk on the Rock, episode number 71. We last talked midway through the Arizona game. We're back talking midway through the other Arizona game. Since then, the Canucks have had a pretty good week.
Woo!
So take it away. Let's talk some Canucks.
The Canucks have won every game they played since we last talked, and they've looked like a pretty dominant team at times. I think we can get into the negative thing a bit later because I want to be mostly positive here.
AKA the third period versus
Yes.
Vegas.
But, you know, I wrote the Canucks off in the last episode. I said they weren't going to make the playoffs, and then they strung a bunch of wins together and are looking like they're going to make things interesting at least. I still think they're in tough, but, you know, I'm not going to say that they're totally out of it now because I feel like every time I write them off, they...
Like I interjected last time, nothing's impossible. Anything can happen.
Yeah.
But the math's not
The
in
math
favor.
isn't great, but the thing that's happened since we last talked to is that LA has slumped, and the Canucks now, well, they're playing one of their games in hand, which they should win. They're up 6-1 now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Against Arizona, but they're going to be 4 points back, and they play 2 games against LA directly head-to-head. So if they win those 2 games, then that's something. The problem is that Vegas is still ahead of them.
Yeah.
So, you know,
They have to pass Vegas and LA.
And then, I mean, if Dallas slipped out, that would be nice to give them like a second opportunity. But I think that Dallas is less likely just because they're further ahead in the games and the regulation wins and all that fun
It's
stuff.
closing up though.
It is closing up, but we'll see how it goes for them.
and the Canucks have one game against Dallas coming up too.
They do, and obviously, like I think the 3 biggest games left on the schedule for like obvious reasons is Dallas, LA, and you know the Canucks schedule. That's the other thing. Like looking at it, it's not bad. Like they've kind of gone through their heavier part, and now they get Arizona again. They get Seattle twice. So those are all games, you know, that you hope they win.
Yep.
And then those 3, and then I think it's Calgary, Edmonton, and so obviously Calgary, Edmonton, those games will be tough because they're gonna be fired up to try and knock the Canucks out of the playoff race, I would assume. But
yeah.
I mean, the other thing we can talk about besides just the overall play of the Canucks been really good is we just saw him score 3 points in that period, but Podkolzin seems to have really arrived as an NHL player now, and it's really good to see, and that he's kind of the power forward style player the Canucks have been looking for a really long time, and so it's exciting to see him actually putting pucks in the net and driving to the net, but also his shot, like there's a lot to like there, and if he can consistently or next year come back, you know, stronger and consistently be a point producer, then that really helps the Canucks outlook as well. And tying into that is the play, obviously, of Pettersson, too, over the last little while has been insane, which is really good to see, and regains all my hope in him as a franchise player. But again, for Pettersson, he really has to, you know, put it together for a full season now. We've seen this a few years in a row where, I mean, his first year was pretty good. He hit a bit of a wall in the second half, but since then, he's had periods where he's looked not great, and then periods where he looks super dominant. You wonder how much of it's to do with the injury to his wrist, but he needs to put those doubters to bed and just put together a full season of dominant hockey. I thought specifically that second game against Vegas, Pettersson was great. I liked the way he was engaging physically in the play as well as obviously on the scoreboard, but I thought that was one of his most dominant games. Yeah, I don't know if you have anything to say on those.
Yeah,
two.
no, I mean, like, I'm totally infatuated with Podkolzin's play, like, since he's become more confident, like we talked about, even if they fall short of the playoffs, they papered him, so, like, I'd probably be tempted to be watching some AHL playoff games to see how he does down there, because the way he's playing right now in the big leagues makes you think that he would be dominant if he kept it up, and, you know, we're talking about how good they're doing since we talked last, and it's also amazing when, like you mentioned earlier, how they're playing without like 3 of their top 9 wingers, and so they've got Podkolzin stepping up, Chiasson stepping up.
Yeah, that's the other player I wanted to talk about, and I forgot. But...
so he's on a 5-game point streak with like 9 points and 5 goals or something. And
do you think they re-sign him?
Nah, maybe.
I think
for
if
like
you
a
could
1
convince
year,
him on the same deal, I feel like...
Or maybe a mil.
Yeah.
Because he's a perfectly fine bottom 6, but fill in on the power play if he needs to or whatever. Yeah. He's an NHL player. He's not quite out. No. But for that value he's on, he's a perfectly fine roster player for them right now. And he's stepping up a lot, which is great. Yeah. Even Sheldon Dry's got on the scoreboard tonight. So there's players stepping up in the absence of people like Hoglander, Besser, and Pearson. Yeah.
Even Highmore, like, we're talking like that fourth line of Richardson, Burroughs, and Dries. Like, it doesn't feel like a legit fourth line, but they're winning. Yep. And so you can't really complain. I mean, the other thing that's been really good about the Canucks, and you kind of touched on it in your talk, was just how dominant their power play's been. I read somewhere that I think since the beginning of March, they have the number 1 power play in the league.
Oh, nice.
So they've been really hot. And again, another props to another players. I think Bo Horvat, who did get hurt in this game, so I'm hoping he's back for the 3rd period, because that's the only one that I'm slightly freaked out about if he goes down. But he has played, I think, probably his best hockey as a Canuck. And it is funny because, again, in the middle of the year, he was slumping. And there was a lot of critique about his play. And I feel like he's responded really well to that. And he's been dominant for a while now, too. So it's good to see. So, if the Canucks keep getting performances like this, they're probably going to stay in the hunt. And we'll see if they can squeak in.
And of course, Demko's back to being Demko.
Demko is, he's just a star. Yeah. But the negative, as you touched on, was that 3rd period against Vegas. And when I was watching it, when they hadn't gotten a shot, with however many minutes left, and then they got credited with the shot on that one that wouldn't have crossed the line. Anyway, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, if you give up a 2-goal lead and you don't, like, generate any scoring chances in a period, you probably, in a must-win game, you probably don't deserve to be in the playoffs. But I mean, if you flip it and you think about the 2nd period and how dominant the Canucks were and how bad Vegas looked, I think you could say the same thing for Vegas, in the sense that was a must-win game and they let it slip away in the 2nd, and then crawled back in the 3rd. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it was nice. It was nice to see them win in overtime. Yeah. But
too bad Vegas got the point.
Yeah.
And you could feel it coming too.
Oh, like, yeah.
It was one of those Canucks collapses you didn't want to admit to yourself was coming, but you knew it was coming.
As soon as they scored the 1st goal, I was like, yeah, they're tying it. And then, But anyway, I mean, they won, and it was confusing emotions that night, because it was like they won, but everything on the out-of-town scoreboard and Vegas getting a point kind of derailed it. So anyway...
Just like tonight.
Except, they're destroying Arizona, which they should do. Yeah. So anyway...
Yeah, I mean, other than that, there's not a lot of league news as we just kind of like mold what the playoffs are going to look like here in the last little stretch. Yeah. Austin Matthews breaking the Leafs single season goal record. We know everyone in Vancouver, including you, loves talking about the Leafs.
Specifically Matthews too.
Yeah, so I mean, he has really been on fire, and I mean, there's a lot of hype about how he got 50 goals in 50 games, but it wasn't from the beginning of the year, and there's a whole... But still pretty impressive what he's doing. And now he's officially the greatest goal scorer in Leafs history. Like, I don't know.
I mean, I'll say this. So 2 things. The fact that it's over 100-year-old like franchise and he's their greatest goal scorer ever is quite a feat. Yeah. Like, Toronto is such an interesting franchise, because if you go back and look at it, it isn't like Montreal, who had all these star players, early on. They've had an average team for a lot of their existence, yet they're so popular. Yeah. And I mean, I'm happy, like, one part of me is happy for Leafs fans that it's like, okay, you have something that you can cheer about. I just think he's a bit of a douchebag, but he is exceptionally good at hockey, and I mean, I think the whole 50 and 50 thing, like, he did score 50 in 50 games. I know it's not going to officially count, but I think people that want to, like, totally poo on it, it's like, it's the same thing. Yeah. And you can say what you want. I mean, I'm a big Ovi fan, but Ovechkin never did the 50 and 50. He came close one year, but it was like draped over 2 seasons, so it also wouldn't have counted. But
Right.
I remember there being like a bit of talk about it when that happened, but obviously it's Toronto. It's gonna be everywhere. He's gonna be compared to all these great players immediately, which is why people get sick of the talk.
Yeah.
But it is amazing. And so props to him. And yeah.
I mean, props to goal scoring across the league this year, because it's up.
It's crazy.
Like, the amount of people crossing over the 100 mark this year is insane.
Yeah.
And like setting career highs and franchise records. I think Kaprizov now has like the rookie and normal like veteran records for Minnesota for goals and points. Like,
it'll be interesting to see like next year what happens, because I think there's a couple things, right? Like, you have all these star players who are really seeming to come into their own and putting up all these points. But I also think that maybe there's not as many good like star goaltenders in the league as there were even like 5 years ago.
mm-hmm.
And if we're kind of seeing a shift there. But I'm really interested to see like in the next couple of years if the scoring keeps up or if this is just a blip, because it's fun. Like, it is fun to see this many goals, and it does seem like in general every game now has a lot of goals. But the other thing I wanted to say was, on top of scoring being up, if you look at the standings, specifically in the East, every team that makes the playoffs in the East this year might have over 100 points.
Wow.
If Washington's the only one that's like iffy,
Right.
but like everyone else is gonna do it, which is pretty crazy when you think about that. So I don't know. It seems to be like a lot of have not in the league, and you know, they wanted to make everything so that it was competitive and there was parity in the league, but I feel like right now there's also a bit of splitting in terms of that.
Especially in that conference, because like we've been talking about for, I feel like, over a month that like we know who's going to be in the playoffs in the East.
I mean, props to the Islanders for even making this conversation last this long, because I know like they've played better of late, but it's still not good enough. And that will go into my last topic that I wanted to briefly touch on, which is the idea of a play-in tournament, because I think this year is a prime example of why it would be good, and I'm not talking about like a full-on series. I'm talking about like what the NBA
like the
does.
NBA does, yeah.
And I think if you took, you know, those 2 wildcard spots and then whoever finishes 9th and 10th in the division, so like right now in the West it would be Nashville, Dallas, Vancouver, and Vegas, and have them play like a single game against each other.
Yeah, so how the NBA does it is 7 and 8 play each other.
Yeah.
Winner gets 7.
Yeah.
Loser plays the winner of 9 and 10.
Yeah.
So, like, number 8, like, if they lose that first game, they have a second chance to make it in, which is nice. So they get rewarded for finishing higher at least. I really like it. I bet the owners would be big on it, because it's an extra money, extra couple home games or whatever for, you know, and like big implication games too. So obviously they'd be like sold out. Yeah, and I mean, if you think about like this year, right, especially because you seem to have like Washington in the East has slumped hard in the last little bit here. And so if they had to play a play-in, and say they play the Islanders in that like 8-9 or whoever wins that 9-10 matchup, like I could see the Islanders getting in over Washington and it being interesting. And it kind of rewards a team like Vancouver, who had a bad start and then fought so hard to get back into it, if they can win those games. Yeah, so, no, I mean, I don't know if it'll happen right away, but I do feel like the NBA, just like it was such positive criticism, if that's the right 2 words to put together there, since they've done it a year ago, is like, I feel like NHL is going to look at that, and at the next CBA, I feel like that'll be a serious discussion. Yeah. It would be great. I'm all for it. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's kind of what I have. Okay. Do you have anything else? I don't have anything else. No. So, yeah, we'll go finish watching the rest of the Arizona Canucks game. And next time we talk, we'll have a better idea of what's happening. Canucks have a big break. They don't play again until Monday. It's Thursday now. Against San Jose. Is that right? No, at Dallas. Dallas on Monday. On Monday. Okay, so big week coming up. Yeah. So we'll have a better idea of what's going on in a week's time. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about other stuff. Yeah. Things, hockey. Here we go. Hockey Talk on the Rock, episode 71. Thanks for listening. Woo!